Om Sahana Bhavatu, Sahana Unatu, Sahaviryam Karavavahai, Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. I heard the candy dish.
It wasn't me.
Whoever it is, you're more than welcome to have them before class and after class, but don't rate them in the middle. Keep your attention. All right. So we are at the very end of the 17th chapter. Deepa, what verse are we on?
We stopped midway through 19 last time, Jim.
Let's do 19 again then from the top. If you'll chant the Sanskrit and then read the English, and we'll dash through it.
Of course. Let me share my screen just a second. Okay. Mudha grahenatmano yat pidaya kriyate tapa parsyotsadhanartham vatat amasa mudahrittama. That austerity which is practiced with self-torture out of some foolish notion for the purpose of destroying another is declared to be tamasic.
I think we did do that one, didn't we?
We spoke about self-torture to some extent. That was the first idea.
So let's go through the ideas again. The first idea,
Self-torture.
yes, we talked about that,
Yeah.
wherein two ways to look at it. First, if I think that through mortification of the flesh, I'm somehow going to be free from identification with the body. And we have lots and lots of stories. I think the best one is the Buddha, who himself went through a period of self-torture, where he tortured his flesh. Doesn't work. It doesn't work. We want to bring the body to a place where we can forget the body in meditation. The other way in which we torture the flesh, believe it or not, many of us, clear about our understanding about attachment to our enjoyments in the world, we can actually have attachment to our misery. What? Who would want to be attached to their misery? So you have some event, some trauma from childhood, some relationship, an unkind word or some upset at work, and you keep running it over and running it over and running it over. I'm sure none of you have ever done this. Sound familiar? Who's had a problem with that at some point in their life? Now, let me tell you why I'm talking about this when we're talking about mortification of the flesh. The mind and the body are not separate. They are a subtle and grossified form of the same thing. You don't have a physical body. You have a physical idea of body. Now, if you look into nature, by and large, the sankalpa of the infinite, you all know what a sankalpa is? Anybody not know what a sankalpa is? A sankalpa is a wish, thought, imagination, intention. It's an almost untranslatable word. But the universe comes about by means of the sankalpa of the infinite. We come close to that. For example, in the Abrahamic religions, if you go to the Hebrew book of Genesis, God doesn't get out his erector set to make the world. He doesn't dip into a mud pot to make the world. How does God in Genesis bring the world about? Who remembers? Those of you who may not be Indians.
Words?
Yes. And God said, let there be light. There was light. Now, I won't go too deeply into this. Who here has studied Mandukya Upanishad? Any of you? In Mandukya Upanishad, in the very first mantra, it says, Om, the word is all this. That which is beyond all this, that's also Om. So there's a relationship in yoga between thought and speech. They're just really linked up. That's why we have mantra, the whole science of mantra. But the point is, as you think, as you believe, as you run these stories in your mind, they can have an effect on your body. So out in nature, now let me give you the law of sankalpa. The law of sankalpa. Any sankalpa consistently maintained that's not contradicted or conflicted tends towards manifestation, tends towards grossification. Now, Ishvara, the Lord of creation, he has sankalpas. Light travels at 186,000 miles per second. Galaxies tend to go in a spiral. Gravity, all the electromagnetism, all these are God's laws, his sankalpas. But you and I, to a limited degree, reenact the creative process of the infinite. If we look to scriptures, more advanced scriptures, the more tantric ones, we're just finished up Tripura Rahasyam, talks about it a lot. Yoga Vasishta talks about it a lot. So that through our intention, yogis can to some degree do what I call dream shaping. This world is like a dream, but it doesn't have to be a nightmare. But you and I may not know that time we spend in negative thinking. Oh, my life is so terrible. Oh, this is so bad. Oh, I'm so abused. And we're in the role of victim in our own minds. In the end, this can outpicture in the body as various forms of disease. Who was it who healed themselves of some condition through laughing? Anybody remember that? It's the same idea. Laughter is wonderful. You have a physiological level, good mood, laughter, stuff like that. It changes things going on in the body. But the origin of it is sankalpa. So if you have a life where you're spending a lot of time in regret, in the desire for vengeance, in fear, doesn't always, but it can make you sick. So this is unconscious malpractice. This is negative tapas. Now, there was a fellow in India during the British Raj. His name was Thomas Troward in the mid-19th century, the height of the British Raj. He was actually born in India, even though he was a Brit. Learned local languages, went back to England, got his legal education, came back and was a judge, a civil judge there. But he had a deep interest in yoga. The biographies I've read, I haven't been able to find out what he studied or with whom. My suspicion is he studied Patanjali, Yoga Sutra, and maybe Yoga Vasishta or some other text like it. So he goes to the West and he starts to lecture and on the creative process in the individual. And then all the later early 20th century, late 19th century, early 20th century, Western New Thought metaphysical teachings all trace their lineage back to India. Ernest Holmes, Emma Curtis Hopkins, you may not know these names, but any of you here read like Terry Cole Whitaker, Marianne Williamson, people like that?
Williamson.
Yeah, they all go back to India. That's where it came from. Yeah. But they talk about how through the changing of our thinking, we can make significant changes in our lives. And the big thing is to let go of this idea that if I sit home and get caught up in a victim attitude full of self-pity, full of resentment, full of fear, full of regret, it doesn't always even make you sick. The opposite is true too. If the underlying sankalpa of your mind is sarvam kalvidam brahma, all this is Brahman. I live and move and have my being in thee, O Lord. Then all of a sudden that starts to show up in your life. Any thoughts on this?
Jim, I have a question.
Please.
Could you talk a little bit about this aspect of spiritual healing that is connected with this?
Not right now,
Okay.
but I will recommend a couple books to you. We'll do it offline. After class, I'll give you some specific things to read and to look at.
Okay, thanks.
Well, maybe one of these days I'll do it. I used to do a class in it, but I haven't done it in decades, frankly.
I'm interested too.
All right. So this is the foolish person tortures their own body. What's the next idea, Deepa?
Out of some foolish notion, which I think you kind of covered.
Going on.
For the purpose of destroying another.
That's the next one. So this is what we call black magic. Or malpractice is a better word to use it. Many people, they learn the law of sankalpa, or maybe they go to a local astrologer, or somebody who does some sort of indigenous kind of magic, and they learn something in order to get back at the people they hate. True story. I had a young lady, and we had begun to talk about these ideas of Sankalpa. She had an interest in it. I did not know this. She had broken up with someone, and he, I guess, had been abusive, psychologically abusive. So she went home and was sending out negative juju to him, you know. And then her stomach started to bother her. She had these terrible stomach issues. And then finally she told me she was doing this. And I said, for God's sake, stop it. Because everything you send out energetically comes back. This is the subtler understanding of the law of karma. Think of it like you drop a stone into a pond and the ripples go out and they come back. So a yogi who begins to understand the power of our thought when we consciously know it, when it is consistent and is it conflicted and contradicted, you begin to take your own thoughts a little more seriously. You don't spend a lot of time in negative fantasy. Give it up. Give it up. Now, Socrates, when asked what vexed him the most, responded, the prosperity of the wicked. I think we can bring to mind maybe a politician who hates on people a lot, lies, it's all these things. Seems healthy. We don't know what each person's karmic journey is going to be, but I tell you, what yoga teaches, nobody gets away with anything. There's a saying in the Hebrew scripture, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. That doesn't mean there's a God up there who says, revenge. No, it's a deep understanding of the law of karma. Nobody gets away with anything. You and I don't have to worry about it. If there's somebody at work who's doing things you don't think are just, you don't have to get into a fight. If it's your job, that's another story. If you're the Inspector General of the Secret Service, it's your job to look for that sort of stuff. For you and I, don't worry about whether or not somebody else is going to get punished for their evil deeds. This is again why the Master Jesus said, I say to you, pray for your enemies. Love your enemies. Even the Gentiles love their friends. I say to you, love your enemies. So you want to begin to be intentional about the kind of energy you're putting out. Now, if a person is in ignorance and their sankalpa is, my thought life doesn't matter, I have no power. That's a sankalpa that disempowers your sankalpa. Thank God, or the world would be in a worse mess than it already is. But who are your yogis? Yogis. Any thoughts on this? Let me just finish up on this a bit. A sankalpa is most powerful in a quiet mind. Do not think that a sankalpa is heal, heal. No, that's like a psychic isometric. You set up one part of the mind against the other. The clearest example I can give you of this. Who here's been to a Vipassana retreat? Okay. And did they do the metta meditation at the end?
Mm-hmm.
Who can tell me what the metta meditation consists of?
Compassion meditation where you send out,
What are the actual words? Do you remember?
may all beings be free from suffering and be at peace, something along those lines.
Do you remember the exact words? Anybody else?
All I remember.
I was taught, may all beings be peaceful, may all beings be happy, may all beings be liberated.
Mm.
But they depends on which translation. There's some form of this.
Mhm.
Why do you think they have you do it at the end of the retreat?
Quiet minds, quieter minds.
Is it to quiet your mind?
Because all of us have a little bit more quiet minds at the end than in the beginning, hopefully.
And if your mind is more quiet, why not do the metta meditation at the beginning of the retreat?
The sankalpa is stronger than him.
Yes. Yes. Because when your mind is supremely quiet, you just think about what you want to have happen, not what you don't. I think of it like a wheel. If you want to do things in the world and your solution is to push matter around, if you want to do 45 degrees of arc by pushing matter around, but if you understand yoga, you bring your mind to the center. So don't think that it's about willing things or efforting. It's not that at all. Like a gardener planting a seed. Let it go. Be patient and wait and be detached. If I'm attached to the result, that is a belief that it isn't going to happen. You see that? I really want a partner. I have a partner. I said this, I have a partner. You know, I really don't have a partner. And it's really hard. Well, that's what's underneath that. If you're struggling, you see?
Because your sankalpa is the fear.
You have a divided sankalpa, yeah. So always connect with the self. In the end, you need nothing. So in Tibetan Buddhism, they do all these tantric meditations, mostly for the good of the world. And part of the teaching is you begin and end one of these meditations, meditating on shunyata. Who can tell me what shunyata is?
Emptiness.
The fundamental emptiness. Emptiness is form and form is empty. So you've got to start from the place, all this is like a dream. For the sake of the world, I may do some dream shaping. But I'm not about fixing. forcing, willing stuff. It's a misunderstanding of the process. If you want more on this, there's the story of Mahasena in Tripurara Rahasyam about the Muniputram, the son of the sage who creates an entire world inside of a mound. And it explains many of these ideas. All right, next idea.
Is declared to be tamasic.
Yes, so this is tamasic. When you are doing tapas, you're doing austerity in a way that is destructive for yourself or others. Next verse.
Really quickly, Jim, you said Mahasena, like who is the author?
Tripurara Hasyam is attributed to the sage Dattatreya. Mystery beyond the Trinity. Mystery, yeah. And you can get a completely English version online. All right, next one.
So this section starts with a sentence that says charity can also fall under three kinds, and then it's the Sanskrit. Datavyamiti yad danam diyate nupakarine deshe kale cha patre cha taddanam satvikam smritam. That gift which is given, knowing it to be a duty in a fit time and place to a worthy person from whom we expect nothing in return, is held to be sattvic.
So this is the whole teaching on dana. Oftentimes translated as generosity, but how we find the act of giving is a spiritual practice. So, what is money? Money is nothing but stored energy or stored labor. You know, if you get paid $50 an hour and you got a $100 bill, that's 2 hours. But abundance, supply, is not about hoarding or having money. It's about a flow. It's energy flowing through us. And what affects people a lot, there are two kinds of people that this is a problem for. For Indians, those who come as first or second generation immigrants, where you didn't have a lot of money in India, there wasn't that much opportunity. And you get this message, you know, you need to do well because you got to be fearful about poverty. Who got that message as kids? Any of you? Well, yeah, I suppose it is for Chinese too. For white people, my generation, many of them had it because my parents were Depression era kids. My mother grew up very poor in Iowa. Her mother took in ironing and laundry. She was a domestic, but she was for a while a single mother. Her husband had deserted her because he couldn't take care of the family, and that was the solution. But the thing to understand is no amount of zeros will get rid of fear. This is a true story. Many of you heard me talk about it. So I had this young man I was working with who's a biochemist and really bright. And he invested a lot in real estate, and he had 5 houses to kind of working at. And then he got this job working for this company, and I think they were making, is it called Kratom? Is that the drug?
That's the drink.
Tell us what Kratom is. I can't
It's
remember.
like related to caffeine, and it can relax your body and your mind too.
You will do it.
But it's barely legal, if legal at all, isn't it?
Kratom is legal. It's the same thing we were talking about. They serve it at like tea houses and stuff.
I'm thinking of something else. Anyway, it was some drug, and it was on the edge legal. And his boss was doing cocaine.
Oh,
And
ketamine?
maybe that was it.
I don't know.
Anyway, the whole point was these were some high rolling sleazy people he was working for. And they go out on the yacht, and then there was all the women that they'd hire, and then they'd all do cocaine and all this sort of stuff. And there was a part of him that was really attracted to this, and there was another part of him that's a yogi. And I said, you know, this is going to agitate your mind. You need to give this up. You're a talented young man. He said, well, Jim, I just want to wait till I'm financially independent, you know. And I said to him, dude, your problem is not money. You own 5 houses. The problem is fear. You all get that? And if we have fear, no amount of zeros will solve it. And if we have the fear and things start to get tight and we feel deprived, what happens? Frequently we go out and do compulsive spending to try to feel okay. Anybody gone through that kind of a cycle? Doesn't work, does it? I know people that had like 50 pairs of shoes, stuff like that. One for each foot.
50 doesn't really seem like a
Outfits.
lot, Jim.
Huh?
50 doesn't seem like a lot.
That's the current state right now. That's not compulsive.
Or people who have clothes in the closet that still have the tags on them that they've never even worn. Yeah. And buying doesn't fix it, doesn't make you feel okay. So here is the secret. The way to become free from the fear of financial insecurity is dana. Huh? Yes. Because your problem is you're energetically constipated. There's no energy moving through. So many spiritual traditions suggest the practice of generosity. Now again, in the Hebrew tradition, the Jewish tradition, in the book of Malachi, the prophet Malachi, he says, bring unto God, saying this through the prophet, bring unto me all your tithes into the storehouse, and prove me now herewith that I will not pour out a blessing upon you, pressed down, shaken up, and overflowing, such there will not be room enough to contain it. In those days, it wasn't so much money, you would bring grain. But if you develop the practice of regularly giving money away, you remove the fear of financial insecurity. Don't believe me. Try it more than once. Try it for a period of time, a month, 3 months, 6 months. Doesn't have to be a lot to start with. This is why it's taught. Now, there are other cultural things. It is our duty in the Hindu tradition to take care of sadhus. We're bhikshus, all of us, we're beggars. So that's part of it. It's our duty to support religious institutions. But I say there's a deeper thing. And it doesn't have to be to some religious or spiritual organization. You can choose to support, give money to a food bank. You can support the ACLU or any other Doctors Without Borders. But the suggestion is learn the art and the practice of generosity. Any thoughts on this? I heard a thought over there.
Yeah, I thought it. How do you prevent from a cycle of giving in order to gain blessings in this kind of mindset?
Well, we'll get to that in the Rajasic form. That's wanting stuff in return. But what it will do is free you from fear. And that's okay. But to give so you get money, that kind of blessing, again, what you said, we'll come back. But let's deeper read the mindset that you need to have as you practice dana. Read the list again for us, would you please?
Sure. That gift which is given, knowing it to be a duty in a fit time and place to a worthy person from whom we expect nothing in return, is held to be sattvic.
So those are the elements. So it's my duty, it is my dharma. So here, dharma doesn't just mean this is what I need to do. I'm a bad yogi if I don't do it. But it's all part of the law of life. That's what I want us to understand. It's all part of the law of life. It's the circulation of energy. So it's good to be generous. And it says here to a fit person. Now, sometimes how can I put this? We need to be discriminating. So if you're giving money to some, say, political group that fosters or advocates violence or the suppression of rights or something like that, it's probably not the right place to be spending your money. But for example, if you give food to a homeless person, that's a fit gift. That's a fit gift. That's a person in genuine need. So it doesn't necessarily have to be doing something for someone who's advancing your agenda in life. And then the main thing, Anand, is to understand, endeavor to do it with no thought of return, at least no thought of return from that person or that organization. Does that make it a little clearer?
Yes.
Yes.
This is kind of a comment, but I'm actually reading a really great book right now called The Soul of Money. And it's written by this woman named Lynn Twist, who is a very successful fundraiser. She's raised like hundreds of millions of dollars. And she basically has experience with some, people who are billionaires and people who are the poorest of the poor on the planet. She writes a lot about the abundance mindset because she's met a lot of wealthy people who feel very much like they don't have enough. And
Yes.
she's met some very poor people who feel like what they have is sufficient. And she talks about money being like water. Some people have it as a trickle, some people have it as a river, but you kind of direct how you want it to flow through your life. So it's very similar to what you just mentioned, Jim. I really recommend the book.
These are universal spiritual principles.
Right.
They're universal.
Yeah, she writes the book in a pretty spiritual way, even though she doesn't directly say that there.
And again, lots of Western religions teach what we call tithing.
Mhm.
The Mormons tithe, the Jews tithe. That's 10% off the top,
The
not
Catholics
out
as
of the
well.
leftovers.
Yeah.
But it also keeps these churches running and stuff like that. But I invite you to look at the deeper principles, that it's the way to move energy into your life, to move through. And I think you will find if you practice it, just, are you the person who always has to, let's divide up the check to lunch, and yours is $15.43 and mine is $16.28. Are you one of those kind of people? On occasion, first step, well, let's split it. Or, no, this time, let me treat you because I love you. Oh, no, you don't have to do that. Try it. Try it. First of all, we may think that it feels good to have somebody give stuff to us. I tell you, it feels much greater to be able to give to others. It really feels good.
But what about appreciation sometimes?
Pardon me?
Giving for the sake of giving, especially to like friends, and then at moments feeling like having maybe some expectation of appreciation versus like
Having what appreciate?
some expectation of
You gotta
appreciation.
give that up.
Gotta
You
give
gotta
that up,
give
right?
that up.
Yeah.
That's expecting something in return.
Mhm.
So, like, for example, in my life, I never lend money to people. I have in the past. I will give money to people. And, oh, Jim, I'll pay you back. And what I usually say is, no, pay it forward. Someone will come into your life in me, pay it forward.
But if you lend, couldn't you help more people because then they'll pay you back and then
It's up to you. You decide.
Okay.
I'm not a banker.
Okay.
Well, I guess you're a bank.
I am in finance. Yeah.
Now, if you're in the field of finance, and banking, that's a different thing. Did you have your hand up?
No, I'm stretching.
Okay. All right, so this is a sattvic gift. A sattvic gift. Next verse.
So we are on verse 21. Yattu pratyupkarartham phalamuddishya va punaha Daite cha pariklishtam taddanam rajasam smritam. And that gift, which is given with a view to receiving in return, or looking for fruit again, or reluctantly, is held to be rajasic.
Yes. So if you want people to notice, I think we talked about this idea in a previous class, you know, if you want to have your name in the back of the program at the opera or the symphony, or I always think of the stained glass windows in a church where they have the donors' names underneath the same, you know. So people know who gave the money. This is all rajasa. If you want other people to notice how generous you are, that's rajasa. And if you're buying attention or affection, here's an interesting one. I don't know if any of you know people like this or have been involved with this. Frequently, when two people get into a relationship and one person makes significantly more, and the other person struggles with money, it becomes almost a hostage situation, because the person with the lesser income starts to feel dependent and obligated if the wealthier person is paying for everything. Now, it is possible to negotiate those things and to do it, because one of you is always going to make more than the other. But the psychology about dependence that can get in there can be very damaging for both parties. Any of you ever got caught in that one? Yeah. And there are some of us who feel that we can't do well, so we have to look for a sugar daddy or a sugar mommy. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that, except that it's debilitating for both parties. For both parties. And then again, the idea of you're doing gift giving for blessings, thinking, oh, the gods are gonna shower stuff on me because I'm a very generous person. That's a little bit rajasic.
Like, when might you do that? Like give gifts to get blessings, for example?
Well, some people I assume in Hinduism, see if you go and flesh out the idea for us, Anna.
Yeah, they definitely do that.
That's like the whole thing.
If you give me a baby boy, I'll break 100 coconuts on each step of your temple, that kind of situation. Yeah.
That's rajasic. And it's the same in Christianity. Do you all know what an indulgence is? Anybody here raised Catholic? An indulgence is when the Pope writes you the certificate that says, when you die, a whole bunch of your sins are forgiven and you don't have to spend time in purgatory, which is just kind of like the waiting room for heaven. You see, your sins are purged. In the Renaissance, the popes used to make a lot of money selling indulgences. So people would sin like crazy and then give a whole lot of money to the warrior popes, and then they'd get an indulgence. The church still does it. Any of you know the Cathedral of Christ the Light right down the street?
No way.
If you give money for the construction of a cathedral, you get what's called a plenary indulgence.
Oh my god.
So all your past sins are forgiven, just like that.
I thought that the Pope banned this.
How much is this? I'm just curious.
Huh?
How much to
like
how much?
wash away your sins?
Yeah, how much? All of your sins for the rest of your eternity?
But no future sins, just the
No,
past.
no, only past, because we don't know
Still,
what's gonna happen in the
that's
future.
that's
So you,
pretty.
so you basically sin,
Shocking.
and almost the end of your life, then you get your punch.
Then you
Totally.
get your punnery.
That's very good strategy.
But the whole idea is it's a way to get people to give to get a blessing.
That's a transaction. That's not really giving them.
You got it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's rajasic. If your gift giving is transactional, that's a very good word. All right, next one.
Do you want the next shloka itself? Or
Yes.
the okay. Yatu pratyupakarartham phalamuddishya va punaha. Sorry, I'm reading the previous one. My apologies. Adesha kale yaddanam patrebhyascha diyate asatkritam avakyatam tattamasamudahritam. The gift that is given at a wrong place and time to unworthy persons without respect or with insult is declared to be tamasic.
Yes. So the wrong place at the wrong time to unworthy people. You know, supporting things that are not for the good of the society. But the very last one is, I think, the most pernicious. When you give money to someone and in that you acknowledge their neediness and their poverty. And it becomes a way to have power, to embarrass people, make them feel little. Again, that's a kind of thing that can happen in relationship. Any thoughts on that?
How do you, so I guess this is like the conservative philosophy about don't give to people because they'll feel embarrassed and you're taking away their dignity. And, you know, like, how does somebody with more give to somebody with less, you know, in a way that is,
You do it quietly, you do it secretly if you can, and you don't talk about
that's great. Makes a lot of sense.
it. That's simple.
Yeah, just don't talk about it.
And one of the things I've done is, this is a lot of money to you. To me, it would be like for you giving somebody $1 or $2. It's not a big deal for me. Let's not talk about
So in your relationship with that person, just don't bring it up.
Yeah.
And make it a gift.
it. It's a gift. But don't use it as a weapon. Don't. You know when it's energetically there on your side.
They can probably tell too. They can probably tell too.
All right, next verse,
Jim, can I ask a question?
please.
You only spoke about money, but oftentimes people have relationships where they do things where they give the relationship in itself without respect or with insult or with some kind of injury, right? Like, so this doesn't necessarily just apply. Are we talking
Good
just
point.
about money, or are we talking about any
No,
kind of
no, you're absolutely right. I'm gonna mow the lawn begrudgingly. You know, I hope you know that I'm giving up my Saturday morning by mowing the lawn. But this brings another thing to mind. in the whole idea of doing things for people and gifts, I recommend those of you who are in relationship or moving into a relationship or want a relationship, there's a wonderful book called The 5 Love Languages. Have any of you read that?
Yes.
The value of it is how one person expresses love and wants to receive it may be very different. So you may be a person, for example, for whom quality time is really important. But if you're involved with someone for whom meaningful gifts is really important, then you gotta, acknowledge that there's different love languages. I won't get too deep in. There's service, there's quality time, there's physical contact,
Gifts.
gifts, giving.
Words of affirmation.
Hmm?
Words of affirmation is another one.
Yeah, words of affirmation. And we're different. And if you're not on the same channel, then the giving of gifts can be misunderstood, not acknowledged, doesn't have the same meaning. All right. Good, very, very good point, Deepa. Next verse.
Om Tat
I love
Om Tat Saditi Nirdesho Brahmana Snividhi Smrita Brahmanastena Vedascha Yagyascha Vihita Pura. Om Tat Sat. This has been declared to be the triple designation of Brahman. By that were created formerly the Brahmanas, Vedas, and Yajnas, or sacrifices.
Yes. So this is a little mantric phrase that is involved in virtually every ritual. The end of class, we do it. What does it mean? Well, Om is the sound syllable for the infinite. Tat is that. It's jargon for the infinite. Sat means truth or existence. So a good translation of it is, and that's the truth. That's Om Tat Sat. That's what it means. But it has deep mystical meaning, and Krishna's going to go into it. So next one, please.
Deepa, you're on mute. So we can't hear you.
Sorry. Tasmado mityudahritya yagyatana tapakriyaha pravartante vidhanokta satatam brahmavadinam. Therefore, with the utterance of Om are begun the acts of sacrifice, gifts, and austerity, as enjoined in the scriptures, always by the students of Brahman.
So Om is the word that's the sound syllable for the infinite. We get the classic exegesis of it in Mandukya Upanishad. We talked about it a little bit. Om, the word, is all this. Om is what's beyond all this. So all this means the phenomenal world. Beyond all this means the infinite consciousness. Then it says Om is divided into Chatushpada, 4 quarters. Most people think Om only has 3 letters. 4 quarters. U, Ma, and silence. A stands for the waking state. U stands for the dream state. Ma stands for the deep sleep state. And the silence we call the Turiya, the fourth. It's not another state of consciousness. It is the background, the substrata, the awareness that witnesses the cycle of waking, dream, sleep. It's not the fourth, like the four legs of a cow. It is the fourth in our discussion. You can think like you have 1 quarter, 2 quarter, 3 quarters, and a dollar. Dollar is that which contains the quarters. So whenever we chant Om, we start almost everything in yoga with Om. We finish with it too. We want to think about U, Ma, and silence. Also implied in this, does anybody do japa, repetition of a mantra, as part of your meditative practice? Always include that fourth quarter. Don't make it just mechanical repetition. Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. Always include the fourth quarter. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Let your mind stop. Also implied in the understanding of Om, this phenomenal world is nothing but consciousness. The ultimate is nothing but consciousness. This world is not separate from consciousness. Waking state and all of it, dream state, and even deep sleep is all in consciousness. So perhaps next year we'll do Mandukya again. I haven't done it in a while. It's the shortest and the most subtle of all the Upanishads. Next verse.
Sorry, I was distracted. Someone's calling me. That's why. Tadityanabhisamdhaya phalam yajna tapakriya dana kriyascha vividha kriyante moksha kankshibhihi. Uttering tat without aiming at the fruits are the acts of sacrifice.
Uttering tat or tat?
Tat.
Yes, uttering tat. Okay.
Uttering tat without aiming at the fruits are the acts of sacrifice and austerity and the various acts of gift performed by the seekers of liberation.
So again, think of it this way. Teenagers will come home from college and they want mom to do the laundry, cook me a good dinner, and they want dad to write me another check for school. But years later, you may go home to see your parents just because you love them. So those of us who do ritual, do it for the love of God. Not to get stuff. That's the highest meaning of touch. Next verse.
26.
That's either 26 or 28. Is this the last one? We got a couple more.
We've got a couple more. This is 26. Sadbhave sadhu bhave cha saditye tat prayujyate prashaste karmani tatha swachandabdha partha yujyate. The word sat is used in the sense of reality and of goodness. And also, O Partha, the word sat is used in the sense of an auspicious act.
So it literally means what is true, reality, an auspicious act. That'll do. I always like to think of it as what that is pure existence. Pure being. 27.
Yagne tapasi dane cha sthiti saditi chochate karma chaiva tadarthiyam sadityeva bhidhiyate. Steadfastness in sacrifice, austerity and gift is also called sat, and also action is connection with these. For the sake of the Supreme is called sat.
So, for example, the idea of acting nobly and righteously in the world. Those of us who may have studied Gandhiji's work, he used to call his movement Satyagraha, usually translated into English as holding fast to the truth. So here it wasn't just the highest reality. It was also noble action. And then one more, and then we'll go finish up.
Yeah, just a second. Ashraddhaya hutam dattam tapastaptam kritam chayat asaditya yuchyate partha nachatap tatpretya na no iha. Whatever is sacrificed, given or performed, and whatever austerity is practiced without faith, it is called asat. O Partha, it is not for here or hereafter after death.
So if we're not mindful, if our intentions are not pure, if we're caught up in rajasic or tamasic practice, here it's asat. It doesn't bring us into the reward of the yogic life. All right, we'll end here. Will you chant our little Upanishad?
Yeah. Om Tat Saditi Srimad Bhagwad Geeta Supanishatsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre Shri Krishna Arjun Samvade Shraddhatraya Vibhaga Yogo Nam Saptadashodhyayah. Thus, in the Upanishads of the glorious Bhagwad Gita, in the science of the eternal, in the scripture of yoga, in the dialogue between Sri Krishna and Arjun, the 17th discourse ends entitled The Threefold Faith. Om, Om, Om.
Okay. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Sri Guru Pyo Namaha Hari Om. Om Tat Sat. All right, thank you all.
Thank you, Jim.